So Kagurabachi continually asks one of the most important questions that I think the fight between Chihiro and Hirohiko is going to focus on, which is what makes a monster? What makes a killer? What is a justified fight? And what is an unnecessary slaughter? Some of the major themes that have been brought up in the previous chapter is really just, is there such a thing as justified killing? A lot of people brought up last chapter all the good things that Chihiro has done and all of the hero things that he has done that completely stop him from being considered a villain. And I think this chapter really answers that to a huge degree, because you have to consider both sides of the coin, right? Chihiro has, sure, gone out of his way during the Rakuzachi to save as many innocent people as possible and protect them from the Shinichi. He took care of Care, the girl that was involved with the Datenseki crystals, and even though we don't know where she is, we can pretty easily rest assured that she is safe. And also, he just has a lot of wholesome moments with her. Chihiro is really good with kids, surprisingly. And we can't forget that he helped Tokori just become his best self, reach his full potential, and overcome that insane family trauma that was really holding him down. But when you look at things objectively, we also have to remember here, Chihiro has slaughtered at least over 100 people by now that he does not know. Who knows what kind of family they have? Who knows what kind of friends they have? He has directly defied the orders of the state government and opposed the Kamunabi at every step of the way, and has also declared himself an enemy of that state should they refuse to hand over his father's enchanted blades at any point after this assassination arc. Now, granted, we have to remember that the Kamunabi government really isn't that great either. They have been more than willing to not just hurt children, but they were the ones that wanted to kill Rokugiro originally and take the swords for themselves. Realistically, the Hashaku just got to them first. But one thing that I think really gets harped on this chapter that separates Chihiro from just being your average villain or just another monster killer, compared to Hirohiko, who, when you look at Chihiro, who clearly has reasons to do what he does, he's going for his father's revenge, he wants to save the world from the enchanted blades. Hirohiko, sure, he's a killer, but what reason does he have to kill other than just, being a dick? Hirohiko just kills simply because when he was young, he learned that it was a good thing to do to not only get where he wanted, but to continually survive and get by. Whereas Chihiro does not share those ideals in any way, shape, or form. But I think one thing is important is, even though you can't necessarily call Chihiro a villain, you could definitely put the title of mass murder on him. And I think the words from Somura Seiichi during this chapter prove that even though you're able to be a mass murderer, you don't have to fully dive into the darkness and become that monster. You may be a monster, but you don't have to let it take over. Because one of the most important things to remember is that it's very easy to look at a quote-unquote hero from afar and admire them. Someone swinging a sword, killing the bad guys, and doing it from behind a screen, it's very easy to be like, oh my god, he's the hero. That's our perspective. But when you realistically and objectively look at everything, take away what Somura or Chihiro or any of these good guys are doing their killing for, and it does not clean them of the blood that's on their hands, especially when you've gotten to triple, quadruple digit numbers of body counts like someone like Somura who fought in the Seitei War may have reached. I'm sure the Seitei War was fought for good reason, and clearly the enchanted blade wielders were enough for them to win. However, again, that doesn't make Somura's body count any smaller, and I think that's the main point that Hokuzono is trying to make. Sure, Chihiro does things for good. Does that wipe his slate clean of all of the morally gray actions that he does? And I think in this chapter, we get that answer. Because again, you look at Chihiro, who still has his humanity about him. He's still able to make friends with Hikori, have a good relationship with Shiba, take care of kids like Care when he can. Whereas Hirohiko, literally does not have any humanity whatsoever. Hirohiko is the perfect example of someone that has not only became a monster through their killing, but has allowed that monster to overtake them. They have devoured themselves and become true evil. That jadedness through killing is the exact reason why Hirohiko doesn't even know how to make friends. The closest thing that Hirohiko can get to a friendship is this interaction he has with Chihiro, someone that's at the same age as him, not a normal person by any means by this age. And Hirohiko only knows fighting and death. And so that's why he goes, I don't really know how to make a good friendship. So maybe we should just try to kill each other and see what comes out of that. Which is, again, showing that someone like Hirohiko has fully become evil. Chihiro still, despite fighting through the darkness, holds on to his light. And this is shown completely when the fight heats up, because as Chihiro does his best to fight against the Hishaku member, the villain of the story, starts abusing all of the innocent audience members and starts throwing them into the line of fire. His papers are clearly able to conceal his vision, so as Chihiro starts throwing his sword around, he almost starts decapitating people that just got caught up in the paper storm. And this proves that Hirohiko, despite being a Hishaku member, definitely is not one of the strongest Hishaku members by any means, because we have the leader of the Hishaku who was not afraid to get right up in Chihiro's face and fuck with him entirely, whereas this person will refuse to get close to Chihiro in any way, shape, or form, because they literally admit that, hey, look, if I get close to you, get close to an enchanted blade, I'm gonna die, so I'm playing it safe. So this guy, especially with his young age, he is a newer Hishaku member. So Chihiro being able to surpass this guy of all people doesn't necessarily mean too much, although it is satisfying to see Chihiro be able to best a Hishaku member, one of these assholes that killed his dad, even though Hirohiko wasn't there. He was too young. What this does point out to is that for all of their differences, Chihiro and Hirohiko, they do have similar resolves and determination. We have seen Chihiro multiple times throughout the story do what needs to be done. And what I mean by that is take risks, be willing to sacrifice himself or whatever is in the environment in order to achieve his goal, and whether that be saving people or helping people, it's usually always for a good thing. Whereas Hirohiko has the same level of determination, willing to do whatever it takes to win. However, his evilness has that resemble something much differently, which is, again, just being willing to sacrifice as many people as possible to get to your goal. Really two sides of the same coin, and it reminds us again that while Chihiro is a murderer, while you could call him a monster, someone that normal people do not look at normally, you can definitely still describe him as a human. Whereas Hirohiko, not so much. We do get this nice little reference to the Sasuke the Hero play one more time from the previous chapter, and Hirohiko once again puts into perspective that there is a part of the play where the hero lets the villain actually full on get away because the villain took hostages and Sasuke wants to save the hostages more importantly than fighting and defeating the villain, which is full on referencing the fight that we're currently having between Chihiro and Hirohiko, because Hirohiko ultimately believes that in order to do what must be done, in order to achieve your goals, you should just admit that you are a monster. You should just, again, let that monster consume you. Stop trying to pretend to be a good person and do good deeds in between all of your bad deeds, and just accept who you are as a person. Hirohiko says that Chihiro is already a killer, but he constantly tries to act like he's not. So the right move, Hirohiko believes, is Chihiro should kill these innocents in order to get to Hirohiko, because Hirohiko admits multiple times Chihiro has multiple outs of this moment. He could slash with Enten and kill maybe 2 or 3 people, but still get out of the storm. He could use Nishiki and destroy the entire area, killing Hirohiko, but also multiple people in the process. But because Chihiro is such a good guy and is so rejecting this philosophy that Hirohiko believes is objectively true, Chihiro doesn't have a win condition in this moment and is going to let Hirohiko win. As we see, death by 1,000 cuts in Hirohiko's paper all hit Chihiro at once, and there's a pretty good chance that Chihiro could have died here, which, although you could argue Chihiro just isn't willing to accept his fate and would much rather die than give in to his evilness, I think it just highlights this difference even more, that Hirohiko, as much as he wants to believe Chihiro is just like him, they couldn't be further from the truth. We get one more flashback to Somura Seiichi, and he reveals that the real reason that he blinded himself, besides all of this Buddhist stuff, would be because he couldn't stand and live with himself actually viewing the death that he caused. Watching himself cut through people was too much. Yet, despite blinding himself and absolutely hating the work that he did, all despite this, he pushed through, took an enchanted blade, and fought in that war. The answer that Somura gives to Chihiro is, look, I know that I'm going to hell and I'm a monster. I'm a big murderer and there's nothing that could stop me from killing people. But the best I can do is try to make my path as a monster as holy as possible. Something that Chihiro accepts and brings into himself, which is his character development for the moment. Hirohiko was not able to reach Chihiro, and while he taught Chihiro a lesson, it was the exact opposite result that he had hoped for. Chihiro accepts that, you know what, Hirohiko, I am a monster. I am going to hell. But at the very least, not only can I save as many people as possible on this dark path of a monster, I can also only bear my fangs at those who deserve it, the other people in the darkness like myself, you, the Hashaku. And as Chihiro cloaks himself in Nishiki to endure all of those 1,000 cuts, he does one of the coolest, most raddest things in the world. We get that Chihiro badass moment finally hitting our quota. He chases Hirohiko into the darkness, diving into that abyss. And eventually, Chihiro doesn't stay in the abyss and the darkness like Hirohiko does. Chihiro emerges in the other side into the light as he stabs Hirohiko through the hand, shoves him against the chair, and ends this fight, which is just beautiful. A lot of people may not appreciate that the Sashaku fight went so quickly, but I think the most important part of this fight wasn't the actual hands being thrown. It was the lesson and the development that Hirohiko was meant to act as an obstacle for Chihiro to overcome and become a better version of himself. And I think that's exactly what we got. One thing that this short little story segment does bring up, and a lot of people in my comment section mentioned it last week, which was, this is very similar to Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance if you've played that game. There is a short interaction between a character named Monsoon and a character named Raiden. And this is essentially the same thing, whereas Raiden is constantly killing people, doesn't really ask questions about the people that he's killing, he just does it in the name of justice. And Monsoon, the villain, says, well, what makes you and I different? And I think this is the important thing. You can fight for yourself, stand up for yourself, fight for what you believe, and even kill the people that oppose you. While admittedly, this does make you a murderer and this does make you a monster, while you're able to walk the path of darkness, you do not need to let the darkness consume you. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that can be taught in a story like this. If Chihiro was to say, I'm a hero, I'm not a monster, I'm not a killer, you're wrong, he probably would have lost this fight against Hirohiko because he wouldn't have been able to overcome the philosophy that Hirohiko was spitting at him. And most of the time, that's the most important part of a fight. Not so much the hands being thrown and who has that last ultimate attack, but who ends up being right in the long run and who has the power to make that righteousness reality. All I'm saying is I am excited to see what happens in the next chapter, whether it is picking up with Chihiro and Hirohiko having their final moments, which was a very interesting relationship between the two of them. Very much, I saw all the people that love the Yuji and Mahito references. Now, whether it was intentional or not, the fact that Hirohiko was the perfect fold to Chihiro's personality in the moment was, again, a great piece of development for Chihiro as a main character, and I'm excited to see where this philosophy goes going forward. I'm also excited to see what the hell is going on with Somura Seiichi, someone who we haven't seen in the present time, has now flashbacked multiple times. So Hokazono clearly realizes how much we love this guy, and I just want to see more of him. So let's see how his echolocation is doing in his temple, and see if Hakori can save the day and get us 2 extra enchanted blades. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. If you have, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you don't want to miss any future weekly reviews of Kagurabachi and maybe any other series you may read weekly. Check out the main channel. Oh, I think it's over here. And for any future extra, video essay type content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.